Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive that's pretty relevant to all of us.
I think so, yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about something that's been making headlines, and it's really at the heart of our healthcare system.
Absolutely.
It's the nursing profession,
Yeah.
and specifically, why so many new nurses are leaving the field so quickly.
It's a real crisis.
Yeah, I mean, we've all heard those stories about nurses feeling burned out, overworked, underappreciated.
Right. And it seems like it's getting worse.
Exactly. So, to get to the bottom of this, we've got some really interesting data.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from some pretty reputable sources. We're looking at studies from nurse.org, Ballad Health, and NSI Solutions.
Wow, those are some big names.
They are, and they've surveyed hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers, so we're getting a pretty comprehensive picture here.
That's impressive. So what are they saying?
Well, the numbers are pretty startling.
Okay.
Nurse.org found that a whopping 50% of new nurses leave their jobs within the first 2 years.
50%. That's more than half.
I know, it's crazy. It's like they're hitting a wall before they even get started.
That's a terrible waste of talent and potential.
Absolutely, and it's a huge red flag for the entire healthcare system.
Right, because if we can't keep nurses in the profession, who's going to take care of us when we're sick?
Exactly. So what makes those first 2 years so crucial? Is it just a matter of finding the right job, or is there something more going on?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. NSI Solutions actually found that almost 24% of new nurses leave within the first year alone.
The first year? Wow.
Yeah, that first year seems to be a make or break point for a lot of new nurses.
So what is it about that first year that's so challenging?
I think it's this really difficult transition from nursing school to the real world.
Oh yeah, I bet.
In school, you're learning the theory, practicing skills in a controlled environment.
Right, it's all very structured.
But then you step into a busy hospital and it's like sensory overload.
I can imagine.
There's so much to learn, so much responsibility, and the stakes are incredibly high.
Absolutely. It's one thing to practice on a mannequin. It's another thing entirely to have a real person's life in your hands.
Exactly. And I think a lot of new nurses feel unprepared for that level of intensity.
Nurse.org actually talks about this disconnect between nursing education and the reality of the job.
Really?
Yeah, they found that many new grads feel overwhelmed by the emotional and physical demands of the job.
It's not just about knowing how to take a blood pressure or administer medication.
Right. It's about dealing with human suffering, navigating complex medical situations, and making critical decisions under pressure.
And all while trying to learn the ropes and fit into a new team.
And working long, often unpredictable hours.
Exactly. And then you add on top of that the challenge of dealing with difficult patients, families, and sometimes even colleagues.
It's a lot to handle.
It is, and I think it's no wonder that so many new nurses feel burned out and disillusioned.
So, are you saying this burnout is unique to nursing? Or do other professions with similar demands see the same thing?
Well, burnout is definitely a problem in a lot of high-stress jobs, but I think nursing has a unique set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, you're dealing with life or death situations on a daily basis, you're constantly making critical decisions, and you're also providing emotional support to patients and families who are often going through very difficult times.
It's like a constant emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, and that takes a toll.
So it's not just the new nurses who are feeling the strain, right? The studies also talk about high turnover rates among nurse managers, the people who are supposed to be providing support and guidance to these new grads.
Absolutely. The American Organization for Nursing Leadership found that a significant percentage of nurse managers leave their positions within the first 4 years.
Wow, so they're not even sticking around long enough to really make a difference.
And it creates this kind of vicious cycle where experienced nurses are leaving and the new nurses who are coming in aren't getting the support they need to thrive.
So it's a systemic problem.
It is, and it's one that we need to address if we want to ensure a healthy and sustainable healthcare system for everyone.
Okay, so we've established that those first couple of years are brutal for nurses. But let's dig into some of the specific challenges they're facing.
Sounds good.
Nurse.org uses this term emotional exhaustion, and I'm curious to unpack that a bit.
Okay.
What exactly does that look like for a new nurse?
Well, imagine you're working a 12-hour shift. You're constantly on your feet, running from one patient to the next.
I'm already tired just thinking about it.
You're dealing with everything from routine care to medical emergencies.
Wow.
You're trying to comfort worried families, advocate for your patients, and keep up with a mountain of paperwork.
And probably not getting enough sleep.
You got it.
Yeah.
And you're doing all of this while trying to learn from more experienced nurses who are often just as overwhelmed as you are.
It sounds completely exhausting.
It is, and that emotional exhaustion can lead to burnout, compassion fatigue, and ultimately the decision to leave the profession.
So it's not just about the physical demands, it's the emotional toll that's really pushing nurses to their breaking point.
Exactly, and the studies also highlight things like sleep deprivation, lack of support, and a feeling of isolation as major factors driving nurses out of the field.
I can see how all of those things would contribute to a sense of overwhelm and burnout.
Absolutely, and nurse.org actually found a direct link between poor sleep and the intention to quit.
Wow, so not getting enough sleep actually makes nurses more likely to leave their jobs.
It does, and when you think about the kind of shift work nurses do, it's not surprising.
You're constantly rotating between days, nights, weekends, holidays.
Right, it messes with your natural sleep patterns, and that can have a huge impact on your physical and mental health.
And then there's the whole issue of feeling isolated, like you're in this pressure cooker alone.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Nurse.org found that having a sense of belonging, of feeling connected to your colleagues and supported by your team, is crucial for new nurses.
It makes a huge difference.
When you feel like you're part of a team, when you know you have people you can rely on, it makes those tough shifts a little bit easier to handle.
Absolutely, and when that support system is missing, it's no wonder so many new nurses decide to jump ship.
Okay, so we've got this intense workload, emotional exhaustion, sleep deprivation, and a lack of support. It's no wonder so many nurses are throwing in the towel.
It's a perfect storm.
But there's one more elephant in the room we need to address, right? The COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, yeah, that definitely had a huge impact on the nursing profession.
And I can only imagine how much harder it made things for new nurses, those who were just starting out in their careers.
Oh, absolutely. For those nurses, it was like being thrown into the deep end without any floaties.
So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the lasting effects of the pandemic on the nursing profession. And we'll look at some of the strategies that hospitals and healthcare organizations are implementing to try and turn the tide.
Should be interesting.
For sure. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a short break.
It was tough. Really tough.
Well, for those of us who weren't on the front lines, I think it's important to try and understand, what these nurses went through.
Yeah.
What were some of the specific challenges that they faced during that time?
Well, imagine stepping into your first nursing job, right? You're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
And you're immediately confronted with overflowing hospitals, patients struggling to breathe, and this constant fear of getting sick yourself.
It's hard to even imagine.
It was a very scary time, and for these new nurses, it was like trial by fire.
I bet. We were all glued to the news, watching those horrifying scenes unfold in hospitals around the world.
It was all over the news, and those were just the stories that made it out.
Right.
Inside the hospitals, it was even more intense.
So these new grads, they were basically thrown into a war zone with very little preparation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And remember, these were nurses who hadn't had the time to develop those coping mechanisms, the resilience that you build over years of experience.
Right, they were still learning the ropes.
Exactly, and suddenly they were facing life or death situations, making critical decisions under immense pressure.
It's no wonder that so many of them are now leaving the profession.
It's understandable. Who could blame them? They went through a collective trauma.
And it makes you wonder, did COVID-19 permanently change the landscape of nursing? Did it create a generation of nurses who are now, just scarred by that experience?
That's a really good question, and it's one that researchers are still trying to answer.
Yeah, it's got to have some kind of long-term impact.
Absolutely, and I think it's something we need to be paying attention to.
So we've painted a pretty bleak picture so far.
Yeah, it's been heavy.
But I gotta believe there's some light at the end of the tunnel, right?
I think so, yeah.
What are hospitals and healthcare organizations doing to try and stem this tide of nurses leaving the profession? Are they just throwing their hands up, or are they trying to come up with solutions?
Well, I think there's a growing recognition that we can't afford to keep losing nurses at this rate. So hospitals are starting to try different things to try and address the issue.
Okay, I'm ready for some good news, so tell me, what are some of the things that they're trying?
Well, one thing that's becoming more common is enhanced onboarding and mentorship programs.
So like giving new nurses more support during those crucial first months on the job.
Exactly. The idea is to pair new grads with experienced nurses who can act as mentors, guides, someone to show them the ropes.
Oh, I like that. Like a buddy system for nurses.
It's kind of like that, yeah. It's about providing that extra layer of support, both practical and emotional.
Because it's not just about learning the technical aspects of the job, right? It's about learning how to navigate the emotional and psychological challenges that come with being a nurse.
You got it. And those can be even tougher than the technical stuff.
And these mentorship programs, are they actually working?
Well, nurse.org cites some studies showing that nurses who participate in these kinds of programs are more likely to stay in the profession.
That's great. So it's not just a feel-good thing. It's actually making a difference.
It seems to be, yeah.
Okay, so mentorship is one strategy. What else are they trying?
Well, another big focus is addressing burnout and work-life balance.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is, and hospitals are starting to realize that they need to do more to support their nurses in this area.
Because that old school mentality of just suck it up and push through, that's not working anymore.
No, it's not sustainable, and it's actually harmful.
So what are they doing differently?
Well, they're implementing policies that allow for more flexibility and control over schedules, things like self-scheduling.
Oh, that's interesting. So nurses can kind of choose their own shifts based on their preferences.
Yeah, or they can pick up extra shifts when it works for them.
So it's about giving nurses more autonomy over their time, more work-life balance.
Exactly. And studies have shown that this can lead to reduced burnout, improved job satisfaction, and even better patient outcomes.
Wow, so it's a win-win-win.
I think so.
Happy nurses, happy patients, happy hospitals.
That's the goal.
So we've got mentoring and flexible scheduling. What other strategies are they trying?
Well, they're also focusing on career development, creating opportunities for nurses to grow within their profession.
Okay, because if you feel like you're stuck in a dead-end job, you're more likely to look for something else.
Yeah, makes sense.
So how are they creating these opportunities for growth?
Well, they're offering things like tuition reimbursement for nurses who want to get advanced degrees, leadership training programs, and opportunities to specialize in areas that interest them.
So it's about showing them that there's a future in nursing, a career path, not just a grueling job.
Exactly. And it's about investing in their professional development.
Which makes sense, right? If you invest in your employees, they're more likely to stay with you.
Absolutely.
What about the financial side of things? Are hospitals finally realizing that they need to pay nurses what they're worth?
I think there's definitely a growing awareness that competitive salaries and benefits are essential for attracting and retaining top talent.
Because you can't expect people to dedicate their lives to such a demanding and emotionally draining profession if they're barely making ends meet.
Right. It's not just about basic compensation. It's also about offering things like paid time off, mental health benefits, childcare assistance.
Those are all important factors.
They are, and it's about showing nurses that their well-being is valued.
So we've got better onboarding, more flexible scheduling, career development opportunities, and improved compensation. It sounds like hospitals are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at this problem.
It does seem that way.
But the big question is it enough? Are these efforts actually making a dent in the turnover rate?
Well, that's what we're all trying to figure out.
Are there any signs that things are getting better?
Well, there are some glimmers of hope.
Okay, tell me more.
Some hospitals that have implemented these comprehensive retention strategies, they are seeing a decrease in turnover.
Really?
Yeah, it's not a quick fix, but it seems like things are moving in the right direction.
That's encouraging.
It is, but there's still a long way to go.
Okay, so maybe the bleeding is slowing down, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Exactly.
And even if we manage to stem the tide of nurses leaving the profession, isn't there a bigger issue here? Isn't it about more than just keeping nurses from quitting?
You're absolutely right. It's about creating a work environment where nurses feel valued, respected, and fulfilled.
So it's not just about putting out fires. It's about building a system that's sustainable and resilient.
Exactly. And that requires a fundamental shift in how we view the nursing profession.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, we need to move away from this idea of nurses as tireless superheroes.
Right, the whole angels of mercy image. It's a bit outdated.
Yeah, nurses are incredibly skilled and compassionate, but they're also human beings.
They have limits, they get tired, they need support.
Exactly. And we need to create a system that recognizes and honors their humanity.
So how do we do that? What needs to change?
Well, it starts with recognizing the value of nurses and investing in the resources and support they need.
Like adequate staffing levels, reasonable workloads, access to mental health services.
All of that. And it also means fostering a culture of respect and collaboration where nurses feel safe to speak up and advocate for their patients.
So it's about empowering nurses to be active participants in shaping the future of healthcare.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've talked about the changes that need to happen within the healthcare system, but this is a deep dive, and I like to, really go deep.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the role of the public in all of this.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Because ultimately, the health of our healthcare system is a shared responsibility, right?
It is, absolutely.
We can't just sit back and expect nurses to bear the brunt of it all. So what can we do as individuals to support nurses and ensure a healthy healthcare system for everyone?
Well, there are actually a lot of things we can do.
So I'm all ears, so give me some concrete actions.
Well, for starters, we can educate ourselves about the challenges nurses face. Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, have conversations with nurses and other healthcare professionals.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand the issues, the better equipped we'll be to advocate for change.
Exactly, and we can support policies that promote safe staffing levels, fair compensation, and improved working conditions for nurses.
So contact our elected officials, sign petitions, join advocacy groups, things like that.
You got it.
And what about on a more personal level? Are there things we can do in our daily lives to show our support for nurses?
Absolutely. A simple thank you to a nurse who's caring for you or a loved one can mean the world.
Yeah, just acknowledging their hard work and dedication.
Exactly. And you can also donate to organizations that support nurses, volunteer your time at a hospital or clinic.
Or even just spread the word about the importance of the nursing profession.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that nurses aren't just anonymous figures in scrubs. They're real people who are making a real difference in our lives.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the challenges, the triumphs, the innovations, and the systemic issues.
It's been a lot.
But the big question remains, is it enough? Are all these efforts actually making a difference?
That's the question we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Ooh, cliffhanger. I'm on the edge of my seat. I can't wait.
Stay tuned, folks. It's going to get good.
Okay, so we've spent this whole deep dive exploring why nurses are leaving the profession like crazy and some of the, innovative solutions that people are trying out there. But the big question, the one everyone wants to know, is any of this actually working?
That's $1 million question. And honestly, it's tough to say for sure. I mean, the healthcare system is it's a big ship to turn around.
Right. It's not like you can just flip a switch and everything's fixed.
Exactly. But there are some signs, some glimmers of hope. For example, hospitals that have really focused on those mentorship programs, they're seeing a real difference in how many of their new nurses stick around.
Oh, that's good to hear. So having that experienced guide, someone to show you the ropes, really does matter.
It really does. And nurse.org, they highlight some pretty compelling studies. Nurses who have good mentorship, they're just happier, more confident, and way less likely to burn out.
That makes sense. It's like having a Sherpa when you're climbing Everest.
I love that analogy.
Someone who's been there, knows the dangers, can keep you from, falling into a crevasse.
Exactly. And that's what these mentors are doing, helping those new nurses navigate all the tricky parts of the job.
So mentorship is a win. What about those other solutions like flexible scheduling, giving nurses more control over their hours? Is that helping?
It really seems to be. Hospitals that are doing this are seeing less turnover, higher morale, and even, get this, better care for patients.
Oh, wow. So it's good for everyone.
Yeah, happy nurses, happy patients, it all connects.
Now, those are the kind of results I like to hear. And what about career development? Helping nurses see a future for themselves, not just a dead-end job.
That's huge. When nurses feel like they can grow, specialize, maybe even move into leadership, they're much more likely to stay.
Right, they need to know there's a path forward, not just an endless grind.
Exactly. And let's not forget about something we talked about before, good old-fashioned fair pay. Hospitals that offer competitive salaries and benefits, they're not having as hard a time keeping nurses.
Makes sense. You can't expect someone to do such demanding work if they're struggling to pay their bills.
And it goes beyond just the paycheck. It's about showing nurses they're valued. Good health insurance, mental health support, paid time off, help with childcare, these things make a difference.
It's like saying, we see you, we appreciate you, and we want to take care of you.
Exactly.
So we're seeing some good stuff happening. But is it enough to just keep nurses from quitting, or should we be aiming higher?
You're hitting on something really important. It's not enough to just stop the bleeding. We need a system where nurses don't just survive, they thrive, where they feel fulfilled and actually want to come to work each day.
Okay, so how do we get there? How do we create that kind of healthcare system?
Well, we have to change how we think about nurses. This whole idea of them as tireless superheroes, always sacrificing themselves, it's not realistic. And it's not healthy.
Yeah, the angels of mercy thing, it's a little outdated, don't you think?
It is. Nurses are amazingly skilled and dedicated, but they're human beings. just like everyone else.
With needs and limits and, lives outside of work.
Exactly. We have to create a system that acknowledges that supports them as people, not just as workers.
So what does that look like? What needs to change?
A lot of things. We need to make sure hospitals have enough nurses so no one is constantly overwhelmed. Workloads have to be reasonable. Nurses need access to mental health care, chances to learn and grow in their careers, and of course, fair pay. It all ties together.
So it's like taking everything we've talked about and actually putting it into practice.
Yeah. And it also means changing the culture, Hospitals need to be places where nurses feel respected and listened to, where they can speak up if there's a problem without being afraid of getting in trouble.
So they have a voice. They're part of the solution.
Exactly. Because let's be real, nurses are on the front lines. They see what works and what doesn't. We need to listen to them.
I love that. So we've talked a lot about what needs to change within the healthcare system, but this is a deep dive, so I want to go even deeper. What about us, the public? What responsibility do we have?
That's a great question and a really important one. Because this isn't just about nurses, it's about all of us. If we want a healthy healthcare system, we all have a role to play.
So what can we do? Give me some action items.
First off, get informed. Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one, talk to nurses you know. The more we understand the issues, the better we can advocate for change.
Right. Knowledge is power.
And then take action. Support policies that help nurses. Safe staffing levels, fair pay, better working conditions. Call your representatives, sign petitions, get involved with advocacy groups. Make your voice heard.
So use our voices, use our votes. Got it. What else?
And don't underestimate the power of simple things. Saying thank you to a nurse who's taking care of you or a loved one. Donating to organizations that support nurses. Volunteering your time. It all makes a difference.
It's about showing nurses that they matter, that we see them, that we appreciate them.
Exactly.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. The challenges nurses are facing, the impact of the pandemic, the things that are working, the things that need to change. But most importantly, I think we've highlighted how vital nurses are to our healthcare system and how we all have a responsibility to support them.
It's been a great conversation, and I hope our listeners will keep thinking about these issues and what they can do to make a difference. Because a healthy healthcare system benefits everyone.